What's going on YouTube? I'm Nick the Tutor, and this channel is dedicated to improving your SAT, ACT, and AP scores. Now today we're going to talk about the grammar portion of the SAT and ACT, the beloved English section, also known as the evidence-based reading and writing on the SAT. You love the names, I know you do. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 strategies for that portion of the SAT or the ACT. Now, I just want you guys to realize this part of the test is probably one, the easiest to improve upon, and two, probably the easiest to game. You can really get a lot out of the strategies on this section, so I want you guys to listen carefully from 1 to 10. Let me know in the comments below, are these strategies a cap or are they big facts? I just want to know, let me know. Number one, I want to talk about a strategy for word choice questions. Now, you have two basic types of word choice questions. You have homophones, which are words that sound the same, like there, and there, it's, so on and so forth. And then you also have just simple definitional questions. For the homophones, you really want to make sure to understand the differences between fair and fair, the theirs, the itses. That is really a studying issue, right? If you study and memorize common homophones, you will improve your score, right? So that's an easy strategy, easy way to get points. Second portion of that, word choice. Now, for those questions, you need to look at the context. I'm probably going to say the word context, I don't know how many times during this segment. For the word choice questions, context is so important because you need the context of the paragraph and the sentence to know what word will fit, what definition is correct, and you really need to be precise in evaluating what paragraphs and sentences mean. Moving on to tip number 2, you want to keep verb tense consistent. Pretty obvious one. In order to attack verb tense questions, when you see an underlined word that's a verb, you want to make sure to look back at the verbs in the sentence. What tense are they in? Make sure to match the tense of those verbs. That will help you get a lot of those questions correct. Number 3, you want to surround appositives and non-restrictive clauses with brackets or some sort of notation so that you can kind of remove them from your mind. A non-restrictive clause is basically a non-essential clause in a sentence. Usually it's like descriptive or just some added words that help you understand what's going on. They're not required because they're not the subject, verb, and object of the sentence. This can help you answer things such as subject-verb agreement questions. Now you will know something's non-essential or non-restrictive if you remove it and it does not change the meaning of the sentence at all. That's a good habit to get into. Use brackets, try to remove it, and see if the sentence still makes sense. Now, the sentence should still make sense within the context of the greater passage and paragraph as a whole. Similarly, appositives are descriptive phrases usually describing a noun, something like Nick, comma, a tutor, comma, really enjoys reading. A tutor is an appositive phrase and that can be removed and the sentence would still say Nick really enjoys reading, which is of course correct. If an appositive or non-restrictive clause can be removed and the sentence still makes sense, you need the double commas and that's where the tip comes in. All right, tip number 4, do not separate two independent clauses with a comma. Once again, independent clause, subject, verb, and object. You don't separate them with a comma because a comma does not separate two complete sentences. You would likely use either a period or a semicolon to separate two complete sentences. This mistake is actually referred to as a comma splice and is really important to know for the SAT or ACT as it's a very common mistake on the section and you need to be able to identify it. You can also fix this by adding a conjunction after the comma. Once again, comma conjunction is a correct way to separate two complete sentences. Number 5, use the fewest words possible. You love the phrase concise is nice. Comment below if you've heard that before, what your strategy is for those kind of questions, but what I like to do is strongly consider the shortest choice on any question first because it is more likely to be correct. Now, of course, that has to be correct within the context of the greater sentence and paragraph, but you do not want excess words. You don't want to repeat anything. You don't want anything to be overly wordy. You usually don't want to use like the word being. That's going to be wrong. Things like that. All right, moving on to tip number 6. Modifiers need to be next to the noun that they modify. Oftentimes on the SAT or ACT, they misplace the modifiers. Google the phrase if you don't get it, but misplaced modifiers basically cause confusion within the context of the sentence because you don't really understand what the modifier is modifying. When a sentence begins with a modifying phrase, you want to make sure that the noun comes directly after the modifying phrase because that helps you understand the sentence and helps it make sense within the context. All right, moving on to number 7, idioms. Idioms are some of the hardest questions on the SAT and ACT because they involve knowing commonly used phrases and prepositions in English language. As you know, in other languages, there are phrases that exist that don't translate well. It's like translation issue, right? If I said break a leg in English, that means good luck. In another language, someone might not understand what that means, and these apply across languages. On the SAT and ACT, they test you on idiomatic expressions and phrases because they want you to have a deep knowledge of the English language. Now, the reason that these are hard is that they do not follow any specific rule other than the fact that it is a known phrase in English that has been developed over time. What I would do is pull up a list of idioms, idiomatic expressions, and try to memorize them. Now, some of the more basic ones like raining cats and dogs probably won't be used on the SAT or ACT, but typically things like prepositions and the usage of prepositions will be more tested on the SAT and ACT in the idiom category. All right, number 8, when you do have a pronoun underlined, you want to make sure that it agrees with the antecedent noun. They do pull a lot of tricks with this with another one of the tips that we went over, right? Prepositional phrases or non-essential clauses get in the middle of the subject, the preposition. That can be difficult to comprehend. You want to make sure that you're looking at the subject of the sentence when you're evaluating a preposition. You want to make sure the pronouns agree in number. So if you're talking about a singular noun, you want to make sure you have the pronoun in the right form. All right, number 9, tip number 9, possessive versus plural. Another big trick on the SAT and ACT. You want to make sure you understand the difference between a plural noun and a possessive noun. You also want to make sure to mix in a little bit about its, and its. As we mentioned before, that differs from a regular noun in terms of what is possessive. So you definitely want to review that, important, and that will get you probably 2 to 3 questions on the SAT or ACT. All right, tip number 10, subject-verb agreement. Another tricky one. When you see a verb underlined, you want to make sure that it agrees with the subject in the sentence. Now, it has to agree in tense as well as number. So if you have a singular noun, you want to make sure the verb has an S on it, like Nick runs. If you have a plural noun like they, you would drop the S, so they run. Things like that seem simple, but when you have a lot of words jammed in between, can be really difficult. All right, guys, those are the top 10 tips for the SAT and ACT English section. Hopefully that was helpful. I tried to get through them as quickly as possible. Once again, remember, context is king, and check out this awesome video about reading comp strategy now.